You've probably played a realistic shooter at one point or another. They tend to look a bit like this, or this. A lot of them look like this. The term realism is thrown around a lot in the gaming world. Is it realistic graphics that makes a game realistic? Is it a realistic sense of scale? The idea that you're just a small cog in the wider machine, a single squad mate in a sea of squad mates. Maybe it's down to realistic weapon models or realistic recoil patterns. Maybe it's all about pure, cold-blooded immersion, the feeling of being on the gripping edge of life and death at literally every moment. I'm not here to tell you which of these matters most or what does or does not constitute true realism.
Hello!
But what I am here to tell you is that there exists a realistic game of epic proportions that somehow encompasses the very soul of the realistic shooter genre, while simultaneously being nothing like any other realistic shooter. A game that sounds incredible, and yet you'll never play it. In a land that bears echoes of early 20th century warfare but belongs to a universe entirely its own, you enter a world of perpetual conflict. Here, two rival factions, the Wardens and the Colonials, battle over territory, resources, and their distinct visions of dominance, each faction employing grueling, intricate tactics and relentless strategies that echo wars of our own past. The Wardens, donning blue uniforms reminiscent of early French military attire, once thrived as a trading empire. Driven from their former capital, Sun's Haven, they now fight to reclaim their homeland from the Colonials, whose dark green capes signify a southern alliance. The Colonials' motives remain ambiguous, seen as liberators by some and aggressors by others, led by generations of powerful leaders like the enigmatic Legates, Silas, and Thea Moreau. This is a universe divided by complex, storied timelines. The Great Wars, a devastating period that led to the Warden's fall from power, are layered with events like the Breaching, where Colonials pushed deep into Warden territory, and the Boreal Wars, fought in the treacherous northern mountains. As you navigate this fractured world, you enter a present day haunted by the ruins of old technologies and lost empires, where survival means braving the echoes of wars that are far from over. This is Foxhole, a game so unique I can barely define it in a category. This is a massively multiplayer isometric, that means top down, but not this kind of top down, that kind of top down, and yes, I did have to Google that, war game that takes place in a persistent world, leaving it up to players to drive all aspects of the war effort. At a glance, you might not consider this to be particularly realistic, and that makes sense. I myself once called this game, "This feels like I'm playing 18 plus Habbo Hotel." But over the course of my game time, I realized rather quickly that I was brutally, relentlessly, and unforgivingly wrong. What the f just happened to me? In Foxhole, unlike most other realistic shooters, you begin your life outside of the game, watching at least one, if not more, tutorials just to understand the very basics. Pretty much everything you've ever learned in your life from adjacent realistic shooters will not help you here. After picking a faction, you're faced with this map. Yeah, better take another look at that tutorial. Realism in Foxhole comes in a few forms, one of which is the combat. And it's not so much the intricate mechanics of combat itself. The aiming system does have a form of deviation, and the use of cover and fog of war is incredibly important. But the true brutal realism of Foxhole's combat comes in the form of your unique understanding of the fragility of your mortal soul.
Oh my god, he's dead immediately.
In Foxhole, more than in any game I've ever played, as an infantry grunt on the front line, you are at all moments on the brink of death. Oh! A single stray round, a grenade chucked into your lap from the fog of war. A breaststroke too far. And it's all over. And that's by design. Foxhole is a rare entry in the realism world where you're not supposed to maintain the utmost care of your soldier's meat sack. Instead, charging headfirst into the enemy for the glory of your colonial overlords, unless you pick the wrong team, is in fact the way to play. Which is good news for me. Of course, a realistic frontline would not be complete without realistic medics, who in this game will do everything in their power to save you at all costs. Wow, thank you. But you can't talk about fighting on the front line without talking about the front line. In the heat of battle, you'd be forgiven for not taking a moment to marvel at the architectural mastery that surrounds you. Artillery cannons, forward bunkers, trench systems, entire roads, bridges, this tank trap hellscape, all thoroughly impressive constructions. It's incredible the devs can pay such attention to detail on a map so big. Afraid not, brother. This is no work of some higher power. Everything in this game, much like real life, is constructed by the players themselves. And I mean everything. That mine, the gun in your hand, the bullets in your gun, your respawn tokens, hell even your bloody clothes have been painstakingly constructed and supplied from the backline to the front line in a forever war with at least 1,000 players aside. There's a war over here! Many of these constructions, much like the device you're watching this video on right now, or the room you're sitting in, have been built by people way smarter than you with a far greater knowledge of the building blocks of the world. And if that isn't the pinnacle of realism gaming, I don't know what is.
9 tanks on my screen right now.
Let's take a look at the backline. Construction begins with the meticulous mining of raw materials. These are then smelted down into materials used for construction. Construction materials are then forged together to form actual things. Those things are then trucked to the front line by players and deposited in areas that people need it most.
Just you in the open highway. Oh.
But how do you truck these things to the front line without a truck? And this is where Foxhole embodies the very essence of that one British Army ad we all know. If you can build a bike, then you can build a motorbike with a sidecar. And if you can build a motorbike with a sidecar, then you can build a Logi truck. And if you can build a Logi truck, then you can build a Colonial Titan-class battleship equipped with 2 triple 150mm turrets, 1 dual 120mm turret, 2 heavy machine guns, 2 40mm cannons, and 1 AI naval turret. But it's here that we reach a fork in the road. For the final tentpole in Foxhole's realistic camping foundations, that's a weird metaphor, is the very difficulty of the game itself. A difficulty near enough required in order to uphold the complex realism of the game as a whole, but a difficulty that ultimately divides a player base that could be from the player base that is. Ah, no! Difficulty in games is not unheard of. In fact, in many games, it's difficulty that introduces replayability through increasing challenge. In games like Dark Souls, difficulty is near enough the game's biggest selling point. But through playing Foxhole, you start to realize that not all difficulty is created equal, and the wrong type of difficulty can spell disaster for the wider appeal of a game. Dark Souls has a difficulty scaling based on increased enemy player health and density, increased enemy damage, and unforgiving enemy attacks and movements. This is the kind of difficulty that can be intuitively learnt and mastered through repetition. It becomes a fun challenge beating each of the bosses and seeing yourself grow as a player while doing it. Foxhole is not this kind of difficult. Foxhole difficulty is like being a real-life top-level naval engineer. You just have to learn an almost insurmountable quantity of stuff. And realistically, no amount of mashing random scrap metal together in the middle of nowhere will give you the knowledge to build an aircraft carrier. Foxhole has a I need to constantly minimize the game and rewatch that tutorial to figure out what I'm doing kind of difficulty, which for most is very unfun. As an example, aside from being a grunt on the front line, the next easiest job in Foxhole is the Logi driver, taking supplies from the back line to the front line.
Sorry, mate.
But to do that, you first need to learn where supplies are actually needed, which means learning what supplies to look out for at different bases, which means finding out what a base actually looks like, which means learning how to find and or construct those supplies on the backline, and also learning this chart of the great supply hierarchy. But you'll also need to learn how to build a truck, which means learning what buildings are required to build trucks, which means learning what materials are needed to build a truck in the first place, which means finding where those materials even are. It goes on and on and on. These are not things you can simply pick up through repetitive gameplay. These are things someone has to teach you or you have to research. And this level of knowledge extends out to every corner of the game and only gets more complex the cooler the thing is that you want to do.
Oh my god, this is so f***ing complicated, man. Why is this so complicated?
Foxhole's difficulty is so true to real life that I rate it a level above hard, above hardcore, above even nightmare, hell, or veteran. Foxhole's difficulty is job level. Playing this game is like having another job, with very real job-like commitments, and it's this difficulty that has at times walled the game off from new players looking to play it. One of those players was me.
I got run over.
Oh my god, dude, people are running.
Additionally, it's no secret that Foxhole's community comes with a reputation. The new player experience is fraught with danger, and the enemy are the least of your problems. The difficulty of this game makes for a truly niche experience, which attracts a relatively small but incredibly dedicated community. A community full of passionate clans and passionate clan members, who can't wait to mass report you for nothing and get you temporarily banned from the game. Or at least that's what the reviews would have you believe. I personally had nothing but good experiences with players in the game, and aside from being told off for parking in the wrong place,
I am slow. Can you move the truck?
Sorry, mate.
and driving on the wrong side of the road,
Stand on the right side of the road.
The guy just told me to stay on the right-hand side of the road.
The left side is the right side for me, you cagools. My interactions were entirely positive. Even when I'd managed to get my truck stuck between a river and a tree and a bollard and a construction of some kind, this guy barely even flamed me.
Brother, what the hell are you doing with that truck?
Don't look at me.
But that being said, I also made no attempt to tamper with anything, at all times felt scared of doing anything of any importance in the game, and lived in constant fear of doing something I shouldn't be doing.
Wow.
But what is the height of realism gaming, if not the feeling of being constantly way out of your depth with a distinct lack of knowledge about anything of any importance? I killed him! But it's the Foxhole community that ultimately gave me my greatest moments in the game. Like this time I was invited to a squad, given a gripping pep talk, then thrust into the life of a pirate on a sick raid of a local island, which ended as you would expect.
Okay. I mean, I think this was a questionable move. I mean, it is a depiction of how war is, to be fair. This is what happens when you try and attack a beach.
Or this other time I was thrust into a pirate's life that ended, well, as you would expect.
Oh! He shot our engine with a single shot. Fail.
Oh no!
I think I drowned.
Foxhole is a realistic shooter unlike any other, which is both its greatest blessing and its greatest curse.
Oh my god!
As a games journalist said in an article I saw recently, Foxhole is one of my favourite games to read about, even if I don't play it. And if that doesn't sum up Foxhole, I really don't know what does. It remains to me at least as one of the greatest concepts in multiplayer gaming. Unfortunately, some of it feels locked behind a borderline unplayably steep learning curve that not even Mr. Free Solo himself, Alex Honnold, would dare challenge. That being said, if you're looking for something to spend your literal entire life mastering, but don't want to put in that exact same level of work in real life, there is nothing better than Foxhole. And with a big new update recently launched and actual planes players can fly also coming in 2025, Foxhole only continues to grow, now upwards as well as sideways. But seriously, how are they going to add planes to this game? Me and my mate were actually talking about this 2 days before they made the big plane announcement.
Yeah, where's the F-16s?
Yeah. Imagine trying to fly an F-16 and top down.
Like 2.5D.
Just constantly doing trigonometry.
3 things are for certain. It's going to need an hour plus tutorial. I won't be going anywhere near it, but I'll happily watch someone else do it. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of stuff, let me know, and maybe watch some of my other videos. This video essay on Squad's tumultuous existence will probably be right up your street. Also, this video on Steam's unknown tactical shooters is pretty good, I think. Other than that, until next time, see ya.
You threw a grenade at me. Get out of there! No!